Welcome to the Enter the Mind podcast.
The most real talk, no nonsense podcast on the empowering of the mind.
Why enter the mind? Because it's that room in your house that's been there all along that you've never gone into.
Well, now it's time to enter with two mind coaches dedicated to self-help and the thriving of all human beings.
I'm Kira Carlin.
And I'm Robert Nelson.
Welcome to Enter the Mind.
In this week's episode, Kira and I have a guest that we'll be interviewing, so I'm very excited for that. Kira, would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So we have a guest today. Her name is Janessa Cockburn. I found her on Instagram, and she's just like a super light soul, and I thought that she would make a really great addition to our podcast to share about her poetry and her singing bowls, and I guess just like her life, you know, coming from a poet and somebody who practices, things that can heal the mind. I thought it'd be great for our listeners to just hear about her life and her. So, Janessa, you want to say hi?
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you to both of you for having me. I'm so excited to get talking and get to know each other a bit more.
Cool.
Totally.
Robert, do you want to start off with some questions?
Yeah, well, if I'm starting off, then we'll have to start with the most general thing. Can you kind of give us a quick version of your story, sort of maybe what is the poetry stuff that you do? What inspired that? How did you originally get into the current projects that you're excited about right now?
Oh, for sure. So I started poetry when I was really young. I would say probably around the age of like 8 or 9 or maybe younger. As soon as I learned how to write, really, I would say. My mom really just used to always buy me a bunch of books and journals. I grew up as an only child, so I kind of made my own, had my own world. And I always used to write for anything, like if I was mad, angry, sad, happy. I just always would grab a notebook and just write down random thoughts. So it really started from that. And I started taking it more seriously in the ending of high school and the beginning of university. I started getting the idea that I wanted to write a book. I always knew I wanted to come out with something, but I guess I wasn't sure. Or back then when I was younger, I just didn't know how I was going to make it happen. So in university, I started writing my first poetry book, which is the one I'm working on now that should be out pretty soon. And I got a lot of inspiration from my life. I would say a lot of different experiences that I had with just family, loved ones, relationships, everyday life in general, and just the struggles that I feel like many people face and can relate to.
What do you do when you're not writing poetry? What are your everyday kind of activities that you do when you're not writing poetry or not doing singing bowls?
Yes, I was about to say singing bowls. No, but honestly, I love my free time. I love being by myself and just going on walks, going in nature, drawing. I love to sketch just for fun and paint and stuff. That's usually what I do. Listen to music, dance. I do a lot of that type of meditation too, reading. Those are my little hobbies and stuff like that, I would say.
I think, I don't know how many people know what singing bowls are. I do. I'm familiar with them. But in case someone doesn't know, could you kind of basically explain what it is and what its purpose is?
Sure. I'm still learning myself too. And from my knowledge and research so far, so singing bowls, there's different types of singing bowls. There's crystal singing bowls, and then there are usually other singing bowls like Nepalese singing bowls, which are made out of sometimes copper, gold, different types of metals. And what they do is they emit a frequency that helps balance the mind and body. It also helps balance our energy centers, so our chakras. Different frequencies, they have different effects on everyone's body because of the tone that they're played at. We get to sync, we get our brains basically sync with the sounds as it's being played. And I just found that really healing for me in my journey, sound healing, which is how I got into the singing bowls. And yeah.
So it's a bowl, but you don't eat out of it, right? It's just for musical sound purposes. But
Yes.
but to an outsider or someone not familiar, it would look almost identical to a bowl that you would eat out of.
It would look almost identical. It's a bit deeper, it has more depth to it, so the sound really travels through it. And yeah, so it could look like a bowl that you eat out of, but it's not. It's a
Right.
musical instrument.
And then how do you create the sound with the bowl?
So there's different strike patterns that you can do with a mallet. So there's leather mallets, there's wooden mallets, there's a bunch of different types, and they all actually create a different type of sound and frequency. So there's different techniques that many people do, but you can just simply put the mallet on the ring or on the lip of the bowl, and it'll create a loud, well, it'll start off low and it'll create a very loud frequency. So
I
that's
think, yeah, I think that's super cool because Kira and I talk a lot about frequencies on this podcast. It's become part of our natural vocabulary. And something we haven't gotten into as much is kind of these practical ways to work with your frequencies.
So, Janessa, when you're doing different frequencies with different bowls and different instruments, etc., do you ever take notice to the thoughts that come up in your mind with specific frequencies?
that's a great question. I would say not so much thoughts, but more feelings. I would say that with the different frequencies, I take note on how my body feels when they're being played, because that usually communicates something to me, like whether it's like, oh, I'm feeling this really like heavy pain, or not even pain, but just heavy feeling like in my chest area. I'm like taking account to that, and I'm like, so maybe this means something, or it could be related to like a different chakra, or it could just be there was something going on there that I needed to release, and that specific bowl is hitting it like perfectly.
That's really interesting.
I'm excited to go get myself a singing bowl because I don't have one. So
It will literally, it'll change it will make your routine of life, or your morning routine, whatever, so much different and so much like more pleasant. It's really good.
I'm curious to know with your poetry, because every time that your poetry comes up on my feed, I read it and I'm like,
oh my
that
God.
was beautiful. Like really, like I love your poetry. So I'm wondering, with your poetry, since you've been at it at such a young age and you're coming out with your first book, is it something that you plan to go like all the way with? Like, do you plan to be like Janessa Cockburn, beautiful poet, you know, like somebody who's known around the world? Do you plan to go big with it?
I would love for that to happen. That'd be amazing. I believe it could happen. I think that's definitely my thought process. I would love for that to manifest out of all of this. And I think that for sure, I would love to perform like around the world, do performances like with a book tour. I definitely want to write more books for sure. So yeah, definitely.
That's exciting. That's so exciting.
Thanks, Kara.
And is this book a book of poetry?
This book is a book of poetry.
And so what inspired the creation of the book? It sounds like you said you started it back in college, university.
Yeah. What inspired it really was I just wanted to create something. At that time in university, it was a pretty hard time for me. I was just dealing with a lot. I think everyone can relate when you're in school. It's a lot of pressure. You have a lot of peer pressure, and you can get into the wrong things too as well. And I was realizing a lot about myself, and I think that really helped me dive more into figuring out what I wanted and who I was and all of that. So going through different relationships, knowing my worth, and like for once putting myself first, it pushed me to just say like, let's make it, let's start it, and let's just see where it goes. and let's do this. You have the talent and you have the words and you have all these poems and you're gonna like continue writing them. So you might as well do something with it.
That was beautiful. That was really exciting. That was great. You got your words out so well. I was like, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. There was another question that I had. Okay, so I feel like most people have I guess kind of like they're kind of biased with or stereotype with people who are like self-caring and like spiritual and like writers and everything. Janessa, do you ever go out for a beer?
Of course. Of course. You have to balance everything out. I honestly don't think there's a wrong way to do this whole like just self-care and everything. I honestly believe everyone has their own unique way of loving themselves and caring for themselves. So whatever that is beneficial to you and helps you, like go for it. Don't let anyone else stop you.
Love that. Okay, viewers, people who do self-care are also grab a beer.
If you want to, go for it.
This idea of like the poetry as an outlet. And, as you're talking more about it, I kind of am getting the sense that the poetry, there's this sort of, it's a different way of looking at it. My perception of poetry when I grew up was like my language arts teacher telling me to write this thing. And I was like, well, I don't have anything to write about. What's the point? But I still had to do the assignment. And it's almost an insult to the art of poetry because I wasn't really expressing myself. I was just putting stuff down for the teacher. So if I were to kind of take that activity of poetry and really use it in a more like a genuine cathartic way, or kind of really address the things that are going on within myself and almost use that as a tool to either get back in touch with myself or to kind of iron things out that need to be ironed out. I feel like there could be so much more potential benefit to it. So could you speak maybe about what the process is like of writing as an outlet and as almost a tool for that self-care, as opposed to just putting words on paper? There's a huge emotional component to it, right?
Yes, definitely. There's definitely a big emotional component to it, I would say. I think for me, I usually write or how it usually goes is I don't really, like the paper calls me kind of, if that makes sense. So whenever that urge or whenever I feel that way that I need to write, I usually just start writing. That's usually how it works for me. And I don't really even think about it. The words just start coming out. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what you were feeling today, or this is what you needed to get out. But sometimes too, when I'm like in nature, this is why I love going on walks and just like being surrounded by all of the trees and just like the sun and just like Mother Nature and like all those amazing frequencies and vibrations. I usually just get like, I feel like uploads and like, or get channel, like I start to channel things when I'm out there, because I feel like you're so much more connected because everything's so much more quiet and you can really like get in tune with that like sacred space. So I don't know. I don't know what my process is really. I just know that usually the words just come to me. I like to set myself up in a nice environment and then just let it flow. I think for the most part, unless I have a like specific idea or I'm doing like a project or I have to write for somebody, then in that case, I'll probably put on some like symphonies and do a couple of brainstorming, and then one idea I'll try and like write a poem and I'll see how it goes. And if I'll just write a bunch of poems and then choose which one I like the best at the end.
Now, do you go back and edit your poems ever? Do you change words or like find better words to use, or do you feel like the words that you put down on your paper first are the words that truly speak from your heart?
That's a great question, actually. So I used to just write and post, like write exactly what it was. But now I've started, I actually do proofread and like sometimes I change it. Sometimes I'll write something and I'll go back and be like, oh, wait, no, this sounds way better. Or this should go here. Or like I'll change up the lines and stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's amazing. I should have thought of that before. So I think it really depends. Sometimes I just write and I'll just leave it. And then sometimes I'll come back to a poem and I'll be like, oh, like I could have added this, or this sounds really good. I'm happy I came back to this and decided to look it over. Do you, either of you, like to write or use writing as an outlet at all?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of a book now. It's about the devil, and everything about evil and how it gets into our minds and everything. I am, I think I'm 65 pages deep right now, so
Oh
I'm
my
trying to get to
God.
around like 250, but I'm working on it, and I also do a little bit of poetry.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah,
I can't
thank you
wait to
so
buy your
much.
book.
Yay, me too. Same here. Thank you. What about you, Robert?
Um, writing to, I don't know, I think I'm very cognitive. Uh, so I kind of just I think a lot and then I make my videos, and try to put together some concepts in like a logical format. Um,
That's good. I need some of that.
yeah, but I feel like it's important to have that balance between the logic and then the emotional part as well. And I want to come back really quick to something you mentioned earlier um, about the poetry as an outlet. And when you were saying that you like going to nature sometimes, or you feel like it's almost a channel is opening up and you feel more connected, all of that language, it made me kind of reflect on this whole. I mean, I think that's what Kira and I try to help people understand through this podcast is like what really is the human being and what is really the human mind. And you can't just isolate the mind as like this collection of thoughts because it's much more. It's also the feeling component. And the feeling is very much connected to the rest of the body. It's connected to everything from the neck down. The pace of your heartbeat is going to give you a certain feeling. The sweating of your palms is going to give you a certain feeling. So, and that's where all the other chakras are. I mean, there's what, three up here, throat, third eye and crown, but the rest are, below the neck. And so we can't ignore those. And um, I mean, obviously after this interview, I'll be trying poetry now as an outlet, but currently it's sort of, I'm narrowing in on the moments right after awakening in the morning and the moments right before falling asleep, because that's when the subconscious is starting to open up. And to use the word, the vocabulary of channels, I feel like channels open up and suddenly I get these weird like rushes of memories. And it's so odd. It's like something I hadn't thought about in years. A memory will just like rush in and it's like, where did that come from? It's like the best way I can explain it is to say that some sort of channel opened up and it just like boom, and it came through like from a parallel universe or something.
Yes, I can
I
totally
don't know.
relate.
What was that?
I said I can definitely relate
Yeah.
to what you're saying. I feel like for me, I guess writing kind of opens up my subconscious a bit. It kind of lets me tap into that and see what's going on, or just to bring things up that even I was like, oh my gosh, like where did that come from? So I definitely think I relate to that a lot. I think at night too, that's actually when I had a lot of like epiphanies, I guess, or moments where certain things have always clicked and came together. So it's funny that you mentioned that. So I could definitely relate.
Sometimes I feel like some of the best time to get work done is like in the middle of the night, because half the world is asleep. And I know that there are so many different time zones, but a majority of the world is asleep, which means that there's less frequencies being emitted and less frequencies that we're picking up. So we get to finally just like be, and like you're looking around and you're like, yes.
Feels lighter.
Peace. Yeah. Yeah. A lot lighter and a lot calmer. So at nighttime is pretty good. And I'm curious about the whole nighttime and the whole morning thing. I don't think I have anything for it right now, but I'm curious about it. I feel like that's an idea that's been sparked in my head. Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Like the moments right after awakening and before going to sleep?
Yeah, because I'm thinking, because you said that sometimes memories come in the very morning when you wake, and I'm wondering if it's because our minds don't have anything like really in it yet, and we're kind of like that fresh slate. So then it's like, I wonder if that thought is coming into the mind as not something to like attack you, but something coming in that's going to be like, I'm going to run your day sort of thing. Or if it's coming in to sort of, maybe like if you were to dissect that memory that's flowing into you in the morning and be like, okay, well, why is this coming to me right now? Is it a lesson that I might need for today? Is something going to come up where I'm going to need to remember the lesson of that memory? Or is it coming up to remind me of good feelings that are going to be particularly useful for today? So that has sparked, yeah, that sparked something. And then same goes for the night, like vice versa.
I want to ask more about this phrase, knowing your worth. You brought that up, I think, in the context of possibly university or past relationships, and that poetry was a way for you to kind of to, I guess, find yourself emotionally, or I don't know. But the reason I bring it up is because I think that a lot of people out there who could be watching or listening to this, I think a lot of them will resonate with that phrase, knowing your worth. Why do you think it is that people don't understand their worth these days? And how could they possibly use poetry or the techniques you used to find their worth?
That's a good question. I don't necessarily think that a lot of people don't know their worth. I think they just haven't unraveled it and found it, because there's so many things these days, I feel like, in society, in our environments and family, that can kind of weigh you down. And I feel like a lot of people, it's hard for them to see the light when they just see darkness, which I completely understand. And I think that with poetry, it allowed me to realize that I have something that I like, that I love, basically. I think that's where it came from. I have something that I love to do, and it kind of reflected back in me that, like, I'm enough, basically. Like, I feel like to know you are enough to pursue what you want to do, I feel like that is what kind of stops a lot of us, because we have a lot of self-doubt that can hold us back from accomplishing or moving forward on things that we really, really want to do. So I think that for me, writing was just that way of gaining confidence. And yeah, knowing your worth. I just think it's hard to love yourself when you don't know how to love yourself, basically. And I think it's all about just learning that journey of how you love yourself and what unique way that is for you, because it's so hard nowadays. I feel like with Instagram and things, there's a lot of different methods, and it can be a lot of pressure for some too, because they feel like they're not maybe doing the right thing, or they're not getting it. So the biggest advice I gave to myself was just to take the time I needed, and I knew that the best way to care for me would come through me learning what my body and what my mind and what my heart likes the best.
That was some of the most beautiful words that I've ever heard spoken in my life. I'm not even joking. That was absolutely brilliant. It was really compassionate to other women out there. And you seem so in touch with yourself and honest with yourself. That's definitely what Robert and I talk about a lot. And our goal is to get people in touch with themselves and learn how to love themselves and learn how to live their best life and learn how to be okay with going into their mind. So I wrote down, I love this one. To know that you are enough to do what you want to do. And I think that that is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard, because I feel like it touches a spot in my heart so deep that it's like, wow, like, so like that's the real reason that I'm literally about to cry. So that's like the real reason that most people aren't doing what they want to do, because they don't think that they're enough to do what they want to do. And I think that that's quite sad. And, you know, I'm hoping that things like this podcast and all the self-help people that are out there that are trying to help, I hope that I hope that those words spoke as deep to our listeners as they did to me. And another one was, it's hard to love yourself when you don't know how to love yourself. And I'm obsessed with that as well, because like you said, there are so many different ways to love yourself. And, you know, say somebody's best friend, the way that they love themselves is they lounge in bed for 2 days and eat salads and watch self-help videos, right? And you know, 2 days later, out they emerge like a golden ring, right? Yes. But then you try that, and then out you emerge, and you're like,
what's going on?
Yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, why doesn't it work for me? You know, so there are so many different ways, and you just kind of have to figure out truly exactly what you said. You know, you kind of just have to figure out what makes you happy and what makes you love yourself. And that definitely helped me a lot. You definitely cleared a lot up for me. So thank you, Janessa.
Thank you. You always clear a lot up when I'm listening to your videos on Instagram. So
oh God, yay.
I appreciate them.
Yay, thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm really glad you wrote that down, Kira. What was the first one again? Can you say that?
To know that you are enough to do what you want to do.
Yeah, that one, I can feel that one also, because everybody's got to take a step forward and do something for themselves. And I think, you know, for many people, poetry might be that answer. For others, maybe it's not the answer. Maybe it's a different technique, or maybe it's something else. But I think the point is the same, or the structure is the same, which is that it is self-care. You know, whichever activity you may choose, it's still trying to deal with your frequencies, trying to kind of arrange this stuff, trying to kind of clean house, so to speak, if your whole energy system is a house, trying to open the channels, you know, open the windows of your house and let the air pass through. And I think it's part of caring for our beingness. And that's a set of words that people don't typically say. You don't really hear that every day. You know, I'm going to go care for my beingness today. But I think it's such an important activity. It's so foundational.
For sure. I definitely agree. It's so important for us to care for our beings, like our soul, our spirit, because that's the first thing that I feel like when that's not balanced, like everything else is just out of whack, and we don't even realize what the real root cause is. And it's that we just need to go inwards for a second and really realize and try and see like what our heart's trying to get to us. Because I feel like it's such a fast-paced world that we can forget to really just like stop for a second, be thankful and grateful for what we have, because it's so much. and really just ask ourselves, what does my heart want? Like, what do I need right now? What do I need to help me in this moment? So I agree with you for sure.
Yeah, great words, great words. Looking at the time, I want to see if there's any questions that we might have to wrap up, or Kira, final thoughts?
All right, Janessa, other than those beautiful words, what is one sentence that you could send to the woman out there or the man that is listening to this that will help them keep pushing on in their journey with just unrelenting belief in themselves?
I would say take it one day and one step at a time. And no matter how long it takes or it seems like it's taking, trust that your path is happening in that very moment, in that very second, and whatever you're waiting on, it's coming. But you just have to have the faith because, like they say, anything worth having doesn't come easy, I think, something like that. So just be patient with yourself because it can get hard and it can definitely feel dark and it can feel like you're not getting anywhere. But I feel like it's truly in those moments when we're growing the most. And every person needs those moments in order to bloom into who they really feel like they should be or who they know they are inside. So just don't be hard on yourself. Don't be hard on yourself because everyone has some type of obstacle that they're trying to face, but don't compare yourself to anyone else's. Just be patient and know that you got this. You were meant to. You're an infinite soul. How could you not?
Great words.
Thank you.
Great words again. Yeah, I think that we've definitely unpacked a little bit more of the human mind today. And that means that goal accomplished. So thank you so much.
I had a great time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you both for having me. It was such a pleasure to be on your podcast, and I'm just excited to keep listening.
Right on.
Yay.
See everybody next week.
Thanks, Janessa. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.